Well, good afternoon and welcome to Seaforth Beach again. There's not really any again, there's only a memory of having been here before, which cannot be proven as factual. But we tend to rely on our memories as past references for things that we find ourselves experiencing now, which actually dulls our sense of appreciation of experiencing things brand new for the first time here and now, which is where life is actually happening. And that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, is completely accurate in that context. So allowing something to be brand new, breathing the air and enjoying the feelings and the experience without taking it for granted. It's one of the great tricks of life, or life in the human experience. So I haven't made any of these little videos for a while because I got a Facebook ban. Kind of funny, 30-day Facebook ban. I don't recall really what it was for now, but something anyway. So this is the first one, and I wanted to talk a bit about the Zoom meetings that we do, and just a few other things and some references for myself on a personal level that have been coming up that I'm trying very diligently to keep my finger on my nose about, and also just a little bit of housekeeping regarding the Suicide and Spirituality Project, which is really what started this whole thing off about 10 or 11 years ago, making these little videos for people who felt depressed and down and conflicted about their place in life and all of that sort of thing. So which at that time, I guess about 10 years ago, I was still having some of those murmurings in an emotional sense, still experiencing some of them as like a clinging residue post-enlightenment of an old story about myself, right, which is now healed. But the idea of producing those videos in that context back then was very helpful. But I have to look at everything in the light of my own thinking about things, and as the dreamer of my dream, the external references that prompt things are always relevant, since I'm only ever looking at my own thoughts about anything, which keeps it really simple. There's nobody or nothing else out there doing something or experiencing something other than that I've projected that out onto them and am analysing it, judging it, whatever, with my pointy little brain, and getting the results of my own thinking accordingly. But if I'm honest, I can recognise that actually my thoughts don't mean anything other than the meaning I give them, but that doesn't mean that that's the meaning they have. And the bottom line there, of course, is what is the meaning of life? Which is where these videos have kind of detoured off to in recent years, to become more representative of the overall picture of life, the universe and everything, rather than just focusing on a little point of reference within it, such as being suicidal and all that sort of thing. Although that's still very pertinent. I mean, everything is always relevant all the time. So in an altruistic perception of the world, you can never exclude anything, but as an individual reference, you're always looking at where you're at, or looking at where your transformation is at, not in a progressive sense, but in the moment sense. Right? It's always in the moment. The whole action of healing is always an action of mind, a willingness to forgive whatever is being presented in the moment. It's not like there's something that you're achieving or a goal that you're attaining. It's a sense of self that is being revealed bit by bit, perhaps, or perhaps all at once, if you're like what happened to me through the dark night of the soul. But it's more like a picture being revealed rather than a finishing line that you cross. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway. So, for me, the personal housekeeping, I guess, seems to be presenting me with an idea that, and it gets tenacious, it gets really, like there's always little, how do I put this, when you first start looking at your own sense of self, and if you backdrop it against A Course in Miracles, which is the one that I always use, if you backdrop it against A Course in Miracles, where Jesus offers you a model of a perfectly healed mind, it's very obvious at first to see where it is that the healing is required. And then as you go along, things become more subtle, more devious, more hidden, all that sort of thing. And you start to get a sense, as I am now, of these little tiny disturbances in mind, little upsets of my sense of inner peace that seem to be almost hiding in the background. It's very hard to pinpoint them, and it's like, what is it? What is it? Obviously, it's always going to be a fragmentation of the idea or a belief in separation from source. But if you can identify things in a very specific pinpoint context, I find that that's always very helpful in healing, because then if it shows up again, you can realize that your efforts at healing it weren't really that heartfelt or didn't have a lot of integrity. So, which is part of the thing with this, that the ego taints everything. Even your best efforts at prayer are tainted by ego. But luckily the Holy Spirit, that intermediary between man and God, steps in, understands what's going on, and purifies the prayer, purifies the intention and all of that sort of thing, because that's its purpose. If you were a computer person, you'd say, well, it was a self-correcting algorithm. You put in as much data as you can, and the algorithm detects what you're trying to do and tidies it up for you. But sometimes, of course, the efforts of prayer are pretty much just lip service. There's no heartfelt attachment, no heartfelt conviction, rather, in them at all. And it's always the heartfelt integrity of your prayer that brings you the ability to witness the answering of that prayer as the manifestation of something that we call healing. I don't have a better term for it than healing. Healing will do, but healing tends to be a bit loaded with all sorts of references, but spiritual healing anyway, healing of the mind. So the Zoom meetings are very cool. We started off with a number of associations that dropped in to have a look and see what goes on, and now we're down to, on each particular day, we're down to about half a dozen maybe devoted souls who have recognised something there. And this is the point that you get to. It's like when I was sent to my teacher Ted. My first teacher actually at that centre was Greta, and a Dutch woman who was, to me, she was a very powerful teacher, very fluent and very she spoke with a great sense of authority, and I learned a lot from her. But when Ted came along, he was overseas at the time, when he came along I recognised him as my teacher. It's like, aha, this is the guy. There was a moment there of recognition, and I knew within myself that whether I understood what he was talking about or not, that I was to stay there. It's because I'd been inner directed. I was to stay there and learn. And there was many times that I wanted to leave, and many times that I wanted to question everything, but I didn't. And some days I would find myself sitting there listening to his discourses for 3, perhaps 4 hours, and only able to actually hear and integrate a few words. But those few words were more valuable and more powerful to me than being able to digest the whole of the course in one sitting. It's like, and also more powerful than not being there, because if I was out in the world, I realised that without a specific teacher at that time, I had no way other than that to integrate any higher level principles into my consciousness, which is what I was attempting to do. It's perhaps not that I had no way, but this was a very specific and direct way, and I was very grateful for it. So our little Zoom meetings are still in the nursery school stage. We're having going through some still very basic stuff, but at the same time, it's only ever the basic stuff. You're only ever really keeping it very simple and very basic, and the, what would you call it, the particulars of everybody's participation are very individual. And I've noticed a small shift or transition in the overall group consciousness as we're going along with it now, so that those participants who came from far afield, let's say, in each of their own paths in life to meet in this Zoom room, are now starting to form a kind of gravitational bond. I don't know if that's the right word, but a common frequency starting to resonate and harmonise at a like level, which is what the whole purpose of it is. The teaching learning relationship itself only exists to bring into an equilibrium the participants within it. And it seems for a moment that one who has more to teach is teaching those who have less, but it's not really that way. It's one mind. It's hard to sort of describe this. It's one mind awakening through an appearance of many participants. I don't know if that's it's really, really hard to talk about it. Ted once put out a little book called, it was a little orange book, only a dozen or so pages, of how it works, I think it was called. And I think Annie was, if you know Annie Liley on my friend's page, I think she was trying to investigate if anybody still had a copy of that book. But regardless, everybody brings to the table what they've got, and it's the overall presentation of the table that we're concerned about, not who brings what, who knows more, or who has a greater experience, or any of that stuff. It's like the whole purpose of it is just to enjoy the feast. So the Zoom meetings are incredible. There's a lot of releasing, a lot of confrontation, a lot of emotional upwelling and things like that goes on in there. They're not like a Zoom meeting where you can hide in a big group of people and remain fairly anonymous. These are full participation meetings where somewhere in the mind there's a recognition that there's no point in hiding. There's no point in trying to be on the edges, on the periphery, looking in, watching what everybody else is doing. It's like there's a moment where you step into the idea that this is my own salvation. I have to participate in it fully with the camera on, to do whatever is asked to be done, all of these sorts of things. And of course the temptation is to think that perhaps there is something other, or some other way that it could be done, or whatever, but it can't. That's impossible. There is only God's will. I could try and double guess that and try and look for a gentler path or a less confronting path, but the bottom line is that this is a journey into fear, into terror, into insanity, into doubt, into negativity, into darkness. That's the journey. That's what we're signing up for. It's a required course. Only the time you take it is up to you. And once you can see that, once you can see what the journey's about, there's no point in trying to, or to me anyway, there's no point in trying to prolong it. Let's just get it done. So the Zoom meetings are a part of an incredible experience of getting it done. That you got to be willing. There's got to be a willingness there to be put on the spot and have everything sort of busted wide open, and be accountable for it, because that is what happens. That's exactly what happens. Anyway, I think that's about it. I have a funny feeling in my back here somewhere that there was something else I was going to talk about, but it's all good. Yeah, so I'm being vigilant. I'm trying to be vigilant anyway. It's like we were talking this morning in our Zoom meeting about the tolerance for mind wandering. In the Course, Jesus says you have too much tolerance for mind wandering. So I'm teaching that this morning so that I can keep it fresh as the point of relativity, if you like, that I want to function from in my own efforts to overcome illusions in my mind, and in that try not to wander off when it is that these very subtle, almost behind the scenes disturbances occur, and they tend to relate to the manner of my expression and things like that. So, but I can't quite put a finger, but it'll show up anyway. So one of the things that I love is, and I actually have it tattooed on my arm, is let your words reflect mercy. And I know that sometimes I could be perhaps more merciful in the way I use my verbiage, but there's a caveat there that what's mercy to one person is abuse to another, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like somebody who's had a very hard life will be more grateful for merciful actions, words, etc., than someone who's had a very well-to-do life who doesn't particularly need any kind of merciful nature or anything. That it's far from their thoughts. So basically, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So mercy is relative in that regard, but and I'm not sure that it actually is mercy. There's something there. This is the journey. There's a little something. And I'm going to keep my finger on my nose with it. I know I have had, and this is a recurring one, I have had reflections back, can't even remember it now, but I have had reflections back saying things like the authority, or the certainty with which I express that there is no world, and the principles that bring about the nature of transitional shift in consciousness, the certainty that I use to do that is unnerving, or something like that. It was disturbing or something. And I don't really know that there's a gentler way to put these things. When you start to see the situation in which you find yourself, like a stranger in a strange land, there is a definite sense of urgency to be about your Father's business, and how to express that more gently, or more, not compassionately, but more, there's a word for it, I don't know. Anyway, my expression is my expression, and a lot of people will either say, or people will either say, yes, I enjoy that, and like it and resonate with it, or no, it's not really, I don't really vibe with the way you're putting that, or things like that. And that, I understand that perfectly. I've had many teachers, and some that I gel to more than others. And because I'm a very visually oriented person in my thinking, I tend to find teachers that use a lot of visuality in their expression much easier to understand. So anyway, that's about it. I'm going to sit and meditate now for for a moment. There's only this moment. And I'll see you guys in the soup. If you want to join in the Zoom meetings, give it a crack. I can't really say to you that you should come to every meeting, but I want to say to you, you should come to every meeting. There's a lot of what would you call it? Looking in rather than participation by a lot of associations, and I would always encourage you to stay put for a while and just see where it leads you. You're not going to get a sense of how things really are based on one or two Zoom meeting experiences, because how you think it is and what it actually is always held apart from each other by the nature of judgment and past referencing and things like that, or cross-referencing. So, but anyway, that's entirely an individual perspective. All right, peace and love.